Before we begin today's review, I would just like to mention that this product can be found at Dan's Dinosaurs. Dan frequently offers incredible deals on new releases, as well as peace of mind when ordering items from outside the States. Be sure to check his store frequently for new merchandise, and if you should ever order from him, be sure to mention that Killershrewfan sent you in the comments box at checkout. It's a massive help to the growing channel, and I appreciate it. Now with that out of the way, let's get to the review. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Killershrewfan's 12 Days of Reviews. Now when it comes to Triceratops, little introduction is needed. It's potentially one of the most iconic dinosaurs of all time, outdone only by the king itself, Tyrannosaurus Rex. It should come as no surprise then that seemingly every company under the sun has gone to the Triceratops well at one point or other when deciding what ceratopsid to produce in model form. And this has resulted in an understandable aversion amidst dinosaur collectors to even more being produced. Just like with T-Rex. That's why when rumors began circulating that Eofauna would be joining in on the trike craze, many members of the community were disappointed at the idea of this company that had produced many unique species of proboscideans and even sauropod dinosaurs would be doing quote-unquote just another Triceratops. Well, leave it to Eofauna to stand out, even amidst a sea of competition. Released in early spring of 2021, not only was this a first from Eofauna with them producing two variants of the same sculpt, but it was also a first in general, as the sculpt in question wasn't just some random Triceratops, but was in fact based on a very specific specimen known as Yoshi's trike. What makes Yoshi's trike so unique is that it currently belongs to an as of yet undescribed transitionary species, sandwiched between the later T. prorsus and older but more commonly done T. horridus, which further cemented the model as a still unique offering amidst the sea of Triceratops figures already out there. It also helps that the specimen had some big honkin' horn cores, just under 4 feet long, which gave Eofauna the perfect excuse to make this model the horniest of boys by augmenting the already long brow horns with an impressive keratin sheath. This gives the figure a very extreme appearance, yet from what we know, it's completely within the ballpark. And what's even more insane, Yoshi's trike wasn't even a full-grown specimen. Yeah, let that sink in. Those horns could have gotten even bigger. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that Eofauna was wise to select a very specific specimen, unique to Triceratops, to base their rendition off of, as it allowed them to do something different while delivering a guaranteed breadwinner, which is important when you're only making a couple of models a year. To further their earnings, Eofauna made the decision to produce two variants of the model, the more colorful Cryptic variant and the darker Dominant variant. I really want to make a joke about that, but it's too easy, and YouTube would probably defund the video. Anyway, this is another cool facet about the piece, but we'll get into why later. First, we have to talk about how the model actually turned out as a standalone piece. Well, let's take a closer look and find out. Starting off at the head of these figures, the first thing that instantly grabbed me was the lack of quote-unquote cheeks on the animal, instead being recreated with a wide, more lizard-like mouth that once again put me in mind of the work of Ray Harryhausen. This reconstruction seems in line with Ali Nabavizade's 2018 reconstruction of buccal anatomy in ornithischian dinosaurs, and I do apologize if I absolutely butchered that name, but this seems to be something we are getting more from some companies and less from others. What I've gleaned though is that cheeks are to ornithischians what lips are to theropods, that is to say, a bit of a debate, to put it mildly, with very little in regards to settled science on both accounts. Either way, this open mouth affords us a look inside where you can see rows of smaller grinding teeth surrounding a pointed tongue and not much else. You do have nasal openings in the roof of the mouth there, but that's about it when it comes to notable features with the sculpt work in here. I gotta say, I'm none too impressed by this area of the piece given how great everything else looks, and the hard cutoff between the red of the mouth and the beak is somewhat bizarre to me. If you're going to make the open mouth such a statement on the model, why not put a little more effort into the interior? I mean, it's by no means a deal breaker, but it is certainly just a little underwhelming. As far as the rest of the head goes, you can see that Eofauna have covered most of it in scales, including the frill, which also reflects a recent find that Triceratops had a covering of scales on its frill, rather than a smoother, keratinous sheath. The nasal region, however, is quite smooth, and I'm particularly intrigued by what they did on the Cryptic variant with this. You can see that the snout is rather colorful, which almost suggests the speculative idea of inflatable nasal sacs in ceratopsians. Indeed, inflatable display pouches are something we do see in a lot of extant birds, and I must say the overall color of the Cryptic variant's head does have a more bird-like feel to it, with the white-rimmed eyes surrounded by black stripes and vibrantly colored soft tissue surrounded by hard surface elements like the beak and horns, which are painted in a gray tone. So it's interesting to me that they seem to hint at this idea of soft tissue display features on ceratopsians and how that idea is linked to modern-day birds. Even if no one has had the guts to go all in on that idea in model form, I'll still give Eofauna the benefit of the doubt by assuming this was a nod to that possibility. The dominant variant is a lot less colorful, with just a cream face that gives way to black the further back on the head you go. You do get a splash of color on the frill with some orange markings, but they're pretty random in their shapes, not at all like what Mother Nature traditionally does with her patterning, which is sort of disappointing, but nothing too egregious by any means. I'll tell you what's not disappointing though, would be those horns. I don't know if it's just my lighting or what, but the paint on those things, combined with the light sheen, creates this wonderfully lifelike weathered surface, and I love the transition in color as you get to the tips. I gotta say, these are some of the best looking horns I have ever seen on a model. I don't know that the Cryptic variant's horns are as well done, but they do still feature their own nice color transition at the tips, so there's that, I guess. Moving on from the head, you can see some lovely folds of skin forming on the neck and above the shoulders as the animal throws its head upwards and turns over its right shoulder. The limbs also feature some great skin work as wrinkles and folds are created as the legs brace against the body and force skin up against the torso or pull away and create these great tension lines. The limbs themselves are very well toned with robust looking thighs and powerful shoulders feeding down into flexing calves and wide forearms as we make our way down to the feet. The front hands feature the correct 5-digit arrangement with only 3 claws, although I will say that the extra digits seem to be a little more load-bearing here than what they might have been. Still, I can forgive that given the exaggerated pose, where we see the back left leg lifted, which may in turn be responsible for shifting the animal's weight more onto those front digits. Overall, I really like the legs on these things. I think there's a bit of a tendency to render Triceratops and kin as overly stocky tanks with pillar-like rhinoceros appendages, and whereas these animals were most certainly stacked, I think these limbs strike a balance between looking very powerful while preserving a gracile and agile appearance. The tail of the figure is sculpted curled up as it follows the curve of the rest of the body, which creates all of these great folds of skin that run down its shorter length. The integument consists of a bunch of the standard Triceratops scale detail consistent with what we found on the Lane specimen, and you have even got the nipple-like protuberances over the wide haunches, although I will say these are perhaps the most understated example of these growths that I have seen on a Triceratops model yet. They're very subtle and hard to see on camera, but just know that they definitely are there. The underside features some nice wrinkles forming with the open jaw, and then once you hit the midsection you have got more crocodilian scales forming just past the wrinkles around the swell of the gut. And for those of you concerned about such things, it does indeed have a cloaca. As far as the pose of the animal goes, I quite like it. The trike is throwing its head up as it lets out a bellow, proudly brandishing its horns as it twists to face a challenger or threat. It's a very active yet pleasing posture, and what makes it doubly cool is that it's posed in such a way that allows it to interact with its counterpart, creating this image of 2 sparring specimens on your shelf. We've seen other brands like Rebor and Nanmu creating multiple variants of the same sculpt, and whereas those paint jobs often look good next to one another, they rarely ever felt as if they were made with the specific intent to interact with or play off of each other. Meanwhile, Eofauna crafted a very specific and thought-out pose that not only looks cool on its own, but also allows the variants to look as though they're interacting with one another, perhaps settling a territorial or mating dispute with those massive horns as they throw their weight around. This makes them perfect for dioramas, unique displays, or dinosaur toy photography, and was a really genius way for Eofauna to get the most bang for their buck by giving not only completists, but even the most discerning collectors a distinct reason to buy both. As far as the paint jobs go, this is something Eofauna can be admittedly hit and miss with. I think their Giganotosaurus is a strong sculpt with a very underwhelming paint job. Meanwhile, the Atlasaurus was a near perfect sculpt with a very strong paint application and color scheme, while all of their Proboscideans seem to boast very natural and well done color schemes. For me, however, these trikes are somewhere between the gold standard Atlasaurus and the drab Giganotosaurus. Unlike the Giganotosaurus, there are actually a ton of colors on here though. The problem is, it doesn't always work. The dominant variant is obviously the much more conservative offering, with a cream face covered in black and orange markings that adorn the frill. The black then runs down the neck and onto the underbelly, while also marking the forearms, thighs, calves, and tail. There are some subtle shades of blue mixed into the black once you hit the body, and the main coloration is a sort of rusted orange giving way to burgundy over the hips and tail. The application is pretty straightforward, but there's some nice subtle tricks here and there to really bring it to life. There's something about it that almost puts me in mind of an oryx or some other such grazing animal, which feels appropriate. Meanwhile, the Cryptic variant is a modge podge of different colors and application techniques. We've already discussed the vibrant colors on the head and how that makes the figure appear more bird-like in its inspiration, but once you hit the body, you can see the cream on the neck transition to more burgundy sort of tones above the shoulders, which splatter down onto the tan torso that's been separated from the underbelly with another airbrush burgundy stripe. The same color then runs down the spine before spreading out again over the haunches and gradually overtaking the tail, marking the cream of the underside with random spots and runs. I also forgot to talk about the frill, which is a mishmash of orange and teal markings, and I know I kind of griped about how the dominance frill didn't have a lot of rhyme or reason to it, but here it feels like you're supposed to find order in the chaos, so in that regard, I do think I prefer this coloration for the frill, even if it's still a little out there. But yeah, overall, there's just a lot more visual interest to the patterning of the Cryptic variant, and with its brightly colored head, it seems the more earth tones of the body would be the perfect offset. But then we get to the facet of the color scheme that almost everyone can agree is bad, and that would be the teal sleeves on the limbs. I can understand the mindset. They wanted an element of color from the frill on the main body to sort of marry the design, and the dominant variant did something very similar with the color on its limbs, but it was done much more sparingly and with a color that wasn't nearly as jarringly out of place. I mean, it's not like it's bad on the figure. The application is much more pleasing on the final product than in the promo images, but it is certainly distracting, to say the least. Overall, I do think the Cryptic variant is much more busy than the dominant one, which is why I think I prefer the dominant. Either way, at the end of the day, both of the paint schemes are an admitted step down from the Atlasaurus given the disparate designs and application techniques. But hey, at least they're more involved and visually exciting than the Giganotosaurus. As far as the size of the models go, in a straight measurement, you get something along the lines of 8 inches long, or about 20.5 centimeters. But if you went along the curve of the spine, you'd actually get something closer to 9.25 inches long. Meanwhile, it comes to just about 5 inches off the ground to the tops of those massive brow horns, or right around 12.7 centimeters. That would put this figure in that 135 scale range for a 27-foot specimen, which is within the size range we can expect from a fully grown Triceratops. However, Yoshi's trike was a subadult specimen, so not quite yet fully grown, which is part of what makes its massive horns so unique. With this in mind, Eofauna's offering for a specific animal may be closer to 125 scale, or somewhere in that zone. Still, it does work quite well as a full-grown 135 scale figure. I don't think anything better illustrates that point than bringing in PNSO's 135 scale Wilson. The stalking, slinking Rex plays off of the defensive posture of Eofauna's Triceratops perfectly, and since they size up so well with one another, there's a variety of unique poses and situations you can place them in. Here, let me just show you. So yes, I absolutely love these trikes, not only for how well they play off of one another, but for how well they can work with other figures in your collection, whether that's for dioramas, displays, or more dinosaur toy photography. I'm going to shift gears here to more Triceratops comparisons. First up, I have Doyle the Triceratops from PNSO, which I always felt looked good, but was a bit too big, especially alongside the new Wilson. Luckily for us though, PNSO have decided to rectify that situation, and we can all expect yet another trike from them very soon. Next up I have the Safari LTD Triceratops, a very popular figure from their 2018 lineup, and perhaps the former best go at a Triceratops in the modern market. Then here it is with the recently reviewed Fallen Queen from Reborn, and I like how these ones play off of each other. It almost looks like Eofauna's trike is mourning the loss of its mate. And here it is with the Batat Triceratops, both the standard and miniature variant, which, although dated in some aspects, still managed to hold up in many others nearly 30 years later. Next, here's the Beast of the Mesozoic Subadult Triceratops, which is also meant to play as a 1/35 scale, fully grown offering. In that frame of reference, I think Eofauna's does work as a subadult when paired with this action figure, as it does appear to be a good deal smaller. And of course, I have to bring in a JP-style Triceratops to sort of highlight the disparity between reality and fiction. I went with the recently reviewed Nanmu Triceratops, aka Heavy Lance, and you can see that beefcake absolutely dwarfs its real-life counterpart. And as a final comparison, here's a nice group shot of all the Eofauna dinosaurs with one another. You've got the previously mentioned gorgeous Atlasaurus and admirable Giganotosaurus flanking the trikes there, and yeah, I really do think it's safe to say that Eofauna is the company that best encapsulates this idea of quality over quantity. They don't release many figures. In fact, these two trikes are all they did for 2021. And even if each isn't without their quirks, they're all still standouts in some way or other. After 4 great dinosaur offerings, I am very eagerly awaiting their Diplodocus, which should be coming early in 2022. And that's going to do it for my look at Eofauna's Triceratops models, both the Cryptic and Dominant version. I think these pieces not only show a strong grasp on up-to-date scientific ideas, but also some very intelligent and unique marketing strategies and design decisions on Eofauna's part. If you're going to make such a commonly done figure, you gotta stand out. And if you're going to just produce one model in 2 color schemes for the entire year, you better make sure collectors have a reason to get both in order to stretch your profits. Eofauna did all of that. These trikes are easy standouts even in the sea of other offerings, given the decision to base it off of a very specific and very unique specimen. And by designing them in such a way that entices collectors to get both to complete a quote-unquote display of sorts was a great call. Even if the paint schemes aren't my favorite, I do still think these are dynamite figures that prove scientific knowledge and creativity, when used in tandem, can create some truly stellar results. As always though, I want to know what you guys think of these figures. Do you own them yet? Are you planning to pick them up? Which version is your favorite? And what would you like to see from Eofauna next? Drop a comment down below, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in to today's review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again tomorrow, when we'll be going back to the Chem beds.